Welcome to episode 2 in the Lucas Mather Studios in Orange County of God, Guns in America. We got Kurtis joining us. We're going to continue our wonderful journey through the swirly, twirly gumdrops of criminalization of self-defense in the name of Jesus Christ. And then we'll get to the Lincoln Tunnel. For those of you who like Elf, the movie Elf, I'm a big Elf fan. I used to be a bigger fan, but then I lost all this weight. I used to be huge. We're waiting for Kurtis to come on. How are you guys? Doing good? Feel free to leave your questions and comments. I don't know if you have any from last time. Hopefully you do. Yes, that is LA Community College. That's LA City College. And that is where the show Community was filmed, some of the outdoor scenes. I don't know if you remember that show with Ford Chase. Or I guess it was Chevy Chase. Sorry, I get those mixed up. Can't believe it's been over a year since we've had this massive intrusion of government power onto the private sector in the name of public health. Yeah, and Christians have baptized that in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In the name of fear of death during Easter. During Easter! Come on, Kurtis. Where are you at, buddy? Join me. Where are you at, buddy? Come on. Anyway, this is the book, God, Guns in America. We did part 1 last week over a cigar. No cigar indoors today. So I got coffee. I got that. I got water. But we'll do probably part 3 with cigars. I'm going to need one, to be honest with you, to tell you the truth. I'm going a little crazy. Going a little stir crazy with this thing. I'll just remind you of the big issue that I have with the book. And that is there's an insensitivity. The soul is inured of the author, I think. There's an insensitivity to the criminalization of self-defense, and that's really bad. There's an insensitivity, there's a naive belief that more criminal laws are at the best helpful, at the worst not harmful. And I think both of those are false when you forget the difference between criminal and non-criminal. Let me see how Kurtis is doing. Let's see here. Seems like we always have this delay at the beginning. Coordinating our schedules has been kind of a challenge. So he's got 5 kids. Okay, here we go. How you doing, sir?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
I've just been trying to keep these kids entertained until you got here.
Oh, I know what it's like to keep kids entertained. That's
Yeah, I'm sure.
So how goes it?
Fine.
Sorry, it took me a little bit. I got situated, made sure I was able to figure out a way inside, so I didn't have to mess with the wind as much.
Let's get right into the book.
You bet.
So I've already been talking about my issue with the book is the problem of criminalization of self-defense. In the name of Christ, by the way, in the name of Christ, which I think is unconscionable. So I know you had a big idea. I wanted you to share from that. What
Yeah,
we
you
only
know,
got through chapter 2 last time.
yeah. The a couple things jumped out at me. Well, the big thing that jumped out at me is interestingly enough is it's his anthropology of the way he approaches guns in general. Um, he's kind of approaching it that they should be taken away, should be limited. Maybe not taken away. Taken away. He doesn't think they should be taken away. I don't want to overstate the case, but that they should definitely be limited. Um, and he doesn't take into account the uh, the
What's that have to do with
he does
anthropology?
well he doesn't take into account. Let me see. I'm trying to find. It's like he doesn't take into account the personalism of things. He doesn't understand how the flourishing of the individual being who's able to take, uh, protect them, self-protection, take care of themselves and those around them, how that contributes to them and to the community. It's like he
Can you give
and
me
it
an example of that in the book?
it's uh, okay. Specific examples. You know, I got to be honest. I don't have a specific example. It's that when I read a lot of the it seems to me that the underlying and an underlying assumption here is that when guns are present, evil is happening. And at best, like when he gets into chapter 4 and he talks about uh, being a peacemaker, at best, evil is acceptable if
Okay,
it's a total last resort.
let's skip chapter 3 right now and let's go to
Okay.
chapter 4 just so people can track with us who are following along.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
We got through chapter 2 last time. There's more to be said possibly there, but I don't see a lot of comments on this, so maybe people aren't reading the book, which is, I don't blame you if you don't want to spend money on it, but um, okay, but you the chapter 4 is about violence. It's called Violence, Guns, and the Gospel, which is where he brings our Christian faith into this.
Hmm.
And I see the section there on peace building that you referenced on page 72.
Hmm.
Okay. So for people, but before that, he has a section on the Bible and justified violence and on page 70. He's got a brief section, rules for justified violence, on 71, and then he connects that with guns on 71. Um, and that's all part of a justified violence section where he's distinguishing his position from Christian pacifism. Now, we have to probably alert people that the the Christian tradition has a pacifistic element to it. There's branches that are pacifist in the Christian history. And he's saying he's not in that tradition, but he's flirting with it, looks like.
Yeah.
And it looks like he might even be wishing he could be there. Something's keeping him from being there. And I think he maybe thinks that it'd be better if he was there. I don't know. But so on page 66, broadly speaking, the two main views concerning violence in the Christian tradition are pacifism and defense of just war. The former, pacifism, is the view that violence is simply wrong. Christians should not participate in it. We should not seek non-violent solutions to our problems, whether personal or political. The latter, just war, justified violence, maintains that there are times when violence is regrettably necessary. The paradigm case of this are self-defense. Paradigm cases of this are self-defense and defense of other people. There is a third view, which I call peace building. This view rejects the pacifist belief that that violence is always wrong and absolutely prohibited, but given the values intrinsic to the gospel, including inherent value and dignity of all human life, peace building allows for violence only as a last resort and includes a very strong preference for non-violence. Peace building is distinct from defense of or participation in just war, and in that it takes seriously the use of violence as a last resort, an idea endorsed but rarely followed by defenders of just war.
Yeah, I had a problem with that last bit right there. An
Okay.
idea endorsed but rarely followed by defenders of just war. Where's the evidence for that? Like that seems like a pretty bold assertion, because the peace building view that he goes on to build out here uh, seems to me not very distinct from the way I've been raised to view violence in general, in self-defense, whether that's hand-to-hand combat or with a gun or any other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't. It's if there's a distinction between his view of peace building and just war theory, it's a very subtle one, um, at at best, and I think at most it seems to me that it's basically putting an emphasis on the peace building, the negotiating before the violence happens, rather than justifying the violence by suggesting all other means are exhausted before you go to war. Um, my understanding of just war theory is just that. Like there are steps that of 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 being a what do you call it? There are steps of progression, right? That lead to war, that create a just war scenario. And it seems to me that I'm missing the distinction between his peace building and what just war already establishes.
Yeah. Well, link that in with what you were saying earlier. You were saying something about what was your big idea again?
With the anthropology of it,
Yeah.
so the anthropological idea of it, I really picked up uh,
I mean,
recently.
that's kind of a big word for some of these people that maybe not, they're not following
Yeah,
exactly
really,
what
really,
the
all I mean,
philosophical use of that. People think social science. They don't think.
yeah, all I really mean by that is what is our view, what's like our view of what helps humans flourish, right? Um, our teleological views of people. What ends are we pursuing? What are we trying to accomplish? What makes our lives better or worse? The more we understand about the human person and what makes a human person flourish or degrade, the more we can understand, the more, I guess, the more accurately we can talk about how we ought to be legislating anything in general, and in particular, in this case, guns, how we should be legislating, if at all, or however that word looks. That's what I mean by anthropology of the person. Is
Yeah.
that helpful?
Yeah. I think I follow what you're saying.
And so, what I think, what's interesting, I think in chapter 4, Austin really does start strengths are. Um, he starts to show more of his strengths, where he's pointing out these incongruencies between the Christian faith and, um, well, the Bible, God and violence and all this, right? Um, but he doesn't. I guess what I'd really like him to include here, um, either here or leading up to this, is what are some things that what are some ways that he views human nature, and anthropology of people in order to inform some of the places he's going. right? As far as legislation and as far as arguing whether things should be made better or not.
Well, things should always be made better, right? That's almost like
Well,
a basic.
so
The
where's the
the
line of
que- the
demarcation
the
between
the, the question is whether this will make things better.
right?
Everybody wants to make things better. Hitler wanted to make things better, right?
Good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if we make things,
I
it
mean, he
seems
doesn't he
often
doesn't
if
just say
in
that.
our efforts in our efforts to make things better in one area, we might make things worse in another area. So what's the
That's
trade-off here?
that's the issue. That's the issue I have with the book.
Yeah.
The issue I have is uh, he's far too cavalier with the criminal law. Far too
Yes.
cavalier. And I like to just go back to basics. The criminal law is supposed to punish criminal conduct. And what
Yes.
people like Austin do inevitably, and people on the left, people, Democrats, let's just call them Democrats, because he takes the Democratic position on this. What people on the Democratic side typically do, and some Republicans, unfortunately, as well, is that they forget the purpose of the criminal law. The
Hmm.
criminal law is not supposed to be this arcane, complex tax code kind of a thing. It's supposed to be punishing obvious criminal conduct, not inventing new crimes.
Right.
But what he does is he starts with something called the right to life, which he thinks that you can derive a right to self-defense from, right? Which I think is convoluted. I think if you're going to be a Christian about it, just be a Christian about it, okay? God says that he blames Cain for murdering Abel. You have a right not to be murdered. That's your right. You don't have a right to life. Go one chapter or two chapters before that in Genesis, where the death penalty is given for eating fruit off of a tree.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to life. You don't have a right to just be alive. You have a right not to eat of the fruit of the tree and enjoy God's creation that he made for you, but you don't have a right just to be immortal.
That's right.
That's not what you have.
That's
That
excellent.
that's Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, and that goes some way in explaining, a long way, maybe 100% of the way, why people die. And that's one of the things that I mean, I've taught this at Pepperdine for 10 years. I'm just giving you a lecture called Western Heritage where I taught these texts. You know, a lot of people ask why, where did life come about? But an equally interesting question, which people don't really ask as much, is how did death come about?
Mm.
Well, okay, so God's in charge of our normal mortal existence after the fall, but there are people that would like to bring about your mortality before that. And that here enter the criminal law.
Hmm.
Do not murder. It's very simple. So what he's doing is like a Pharisee, he's building a hedge around that law.
That's right.
And he's saying, okay, well, so we got okay, so there's people being murdered. Maybe you want to prevent suicide, but let's stick with murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Maybe stealing, robbery, something like that. It's robbery if it's with a weapon. Um, well, maybe we can. It's a little bit too easy to get these weapons, so let's make that criminal to get the weapon, or maybe and now with guns, it's not even just the weapon is possession of the weapon is criminal. It's what features does the weapon have? Does it have 11 rounds in the magazine? Of 10, okay, model citizen, but
Where are you
11,
owning?
you're a criminal. You're a
Yeah.
criminal.
Where
So
are you when you're owning that
he's
weapon? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Exactly, yes. Do you have your big toe on a college campus? Because that's a felony. But if it's 1 inch off that, then model citizen, you're an Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
And he seems to be completely insensitive to those realities on the ground in our American context. And in our American context, I think he has it exactly wrong. I'll go back to chapter 4. Let's
Well, can I
the
point
gun.
something out real quick while you're looking at that or bringing us over
Sure,
there? I
of
just want
course.
to I just want to point out, like, to try to be a little fair to him, right? This is a wait
We
a
are
second.
being fair. We are being fair to him. We are being 100% fair to him.
Okay, I've
I
tried to
will.
be.
I will be. I will. Be, I don't want to be a little fair. I want to be 100% fair
You're
to him.
right. You're right. I want to. I really want Austin to know that we're our criticisms here are trying to be constructive and not just tearing him apart. And I don't. Not that I think you were doing that. I'm just trying to be sensitive. That's all. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. I'm a
Well,
product of my culture.
we skipped
But
chapter 3, which is where I have all the compliments.
oh,
We'll get to
that's
that.
it. Yeah,
We'll get to
we
that.
can get. So all I wanted to say real quick was he makes a similar error that's happening really across the board in our criminal justice system in the over
Yes.
that's
Yes.
perpetuating the over criminalization
Yes.
problem that we
Yes. Yes.
have in our
Yes.
culture across the board.
Yes.
It
Yes.
affects everybody of every
Yes.
stripe. And
Absolutely.
so I want to point out a quote here that I thought was really good from
Yeah.
another book I'm reading. Um, and it says, as the criminal justice system becomes more centralized, criminal law evolves into a depersonalized process with a
Wait,
focus
where are
on.
you at? Where are you at in the book?
I'm no. I'm reading this quote from another book that I'm reading alongside
Oh, what's the
here.
name of the book?
It's called Ending Overcriminalization and Mass Incarceration by Anthony Bradley.
Oh, okay.
It's a phenomenal book. I think very
Does it have
highly.
pictures in it?
Unfortunately, no, just one on the cover.
Okay. If it doesn't have pictures on it, I'm not going to read it.
Yeah, I understand. Um, I really, I really like Bradley, but he's hit it out of the park on this one.
Yeah.
Anyway, this quote he says in here is, uh, with a focus. Okay, it's devolved into a criminal process, a depersonalized process with a focus on the abstractions of criminal law procedure rather than the costs to human persons, victims and offenders, and local communities. So
Yes.
it's like we've conflated criminals, or maybe I should say we've conflated felony, misdemeanor, infraction. They're all criminals.
Sure.
Everything's criminal. And
Yeah.
that's really the wrong way of looking at it. You can't reduce it that way. You can't reduce it that much.
Can you tie that in with the book? Because I'm not sure where that's fitting in with the book exactly.
Well, so with the book, it kind of goes to what you're saying, big toe on campus, 1 inch off, you're an Eagle Scout. Um,
Yeah.
we're creating all, like you're saying, we're creating all these extra hedges to back up, so that we
Yeah.
don't become a criminal. But in avoiding to become a criminal, we're creating all these prior steps that are criminalized. It does, it's the ad infinitum, you know, and
Yeah.
making it easier and easier to get in trouble for not being a
Well,
criminal.
you're redefining criminal. That's what
Exactly.
we're doing.
Yes.
You're
Well,
taking
I'm not.
innocent. No,
I'm not.
yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah, but they are.
Right.
It's not. It's not Republicans that are against deregulation. It's Democrats. He's on that side. He's
Right.
firmly in that camp. I don't see Democrats lining up to see how many of these damn regulations can we get rid of. We
Right.
are too criminals. Besides drugs, but it's like
You know,
you
an
know,
interesting statistic on that.
originally it was sodomy. They were lining up to decriminalize sodomy,
Right.
and drugs, but butt sex and BJ's, which is what
Right.
sodomy is, and and making yourself basically dangerous to drive a car and raise kids, that should be decriminalized. Now, to be clear, he's not talking about drug crimes, but firearms crimes are is just as prevalent and irrational. In fact, more so, far more so, far more so. And to your point, um, he's totally insensitive about the distinctions there, but the gradations. I think an infraction, like if you want to talk about infractions, if you want to dissuade people from carrying a gun without a license, where they're vetted by trained safety professionals and how to conduct yourself with a firearm in public in a way that's as safe as possible. Um, you could start with infractions like a speeding ticket, but that's not what they do. They go straight to felony, which is,
Yeah.
if you screw up here and you don't know the change of jurisdiction laws or whatever, then you're going to end up unable to provide for your children. You're going to be shamed upon. You're going to experience what at the time Judge Barrett, now Justice Barrett on the Supreme Court,
Hmm.
called civil death.
Yes.
And he's totally insensitive to that. He's a complete, and in the name of peace building, he is not even aware of that. And I just,
Yeah.
uh,
I would be surprised if
that
he's thought
it's
about the idea of civil death.
anyway. Okay, I wanted to mention something in chapter 4, peace building. He says on page 72, he says, we are too quick to turn to violence. Consider Dallas megachurch pastor Robert Jeffress, who after the mass shooting at a Texas church, which one?
Yeah, we've had a
Claimed
few.
that from, yeah, but two of them were stopped by people with who shot the guy.
Yeah, with he does. I think he
I'm not
brings
I'm
up,
not
up
sure
one
which
of
one
them.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
But claim that from 25 to 50% of his congregation have concealed carry permits, and that many bring their guns into church. This is a nice line from a movie, about the Old West, but coming from someone who supposed to be a minister of the gospel, it is, from a perspective of peace building, simply unacceptable. Unbelievable. After that guy stopped the murderer in that church in White Settlement, which I think happened after the book was published. He doesn't even mention that.
To say that's completely
Unbelievable.
unacceptable. Yeah.
That's a problem right there. If you don't believe that you have a right to prevent murder, that's innocent conduct, then you're already off the reservation on that.
Yeah.
I think that Jesus resisted evil. He actively resisted evil. He cast out demons. He he healed the sick. He healed the blind. He made himself available to people in need, and people had enormous needs. And of course, what he's done for us is he's taken the penalty of our sins on the cross himself and was raised again on the third day so that we would not experience the penalty of sin, which is death. And to think that you have no business in terms of the gospel preventing murder is just the oddest thing in the world, especially when you can learn how to do it. You can learn how to do it as easy as you can learn driving a car. It takes a
It,
lot of experience to drive a car, and I don't think people realize how much experience you have driving a car. Oftentimes you do it every day. That's a lot of experience. If you spent a fraction of that with firearms. You'd be competent.
Right. You'd probably be
Anyway,
more,
so,
yeah, you'd be more competent than some law enforcement. Because
well,
just because you're law enforcement doesn't make you competent.
yeah, well, I mean, they're supposed to be trained.
I'm just saying they're not all, that's all. I don't know why I said that. I didn't need to bring that up. The the thing that you made me think of is a common reaction, and you know, what Mike is struggling with here is the tension between, you know, one of the examples he gives later in the chapter. I should I'm sorry, I don't have the reference where the specific page, but where he talks about the Peter lopping off the ear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the interesting and he says he seems to use this as an example of how, you know, hey, Jesus rebukes him and says, hey, dude, this isn't how we do it. This isn't what I'm ushering in, you know. But there's an important distinction between preventing murder and and Peter's act of aggression, initiating an act of aggression toward that soldier, right? There's a big difference. Um, Now, had that soldier come, what would the have happened had that soldier just tried to kill Jesus right there on the spot, run him through with his sword, and Peter then defends him and kills the soldier? Now, what would the outcome be? That's a very different scenario than the scenario of Peter lopping off his ear.
Yeah, and there's
So
there's
it
all
doesn't
sorts
line
of
up.
interesting well, there's all sorts of interesting things about that passage anyway. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what the first thing that sticks out to me is that Peter and Jesus were very close.
Mm-hmm.
Peter said, Jesus says, I'm going to build my church on you. I mean, this is a very close relationship that they have. And it just matter of factly, just nonchalantly, the text references in all four gospels that Peter had a sword. Now, this is interesting. There is no
It is.
discussion at all, about how Jesus felt about Peter carrying a sword, but it seemed to be as common as carrying like a money belt or anything like that. I mean, in other words, it was common. It was normal.
Do you think they carried
And
swords in synagogue?
uh, Jesus, Jesus did not. I don't know. The earliest extant synagogue records we have in history are from Luke 4, and um, there's a vague reference in James, which is earlier than Luke. James is actually the earliest, but there's not really a description of it in James. Um, in It's preaching in James. James is preaching. In Luke, it's a narrative of Jesus unraveling the scroll and reading from Isaiah. And but the interesting thing is that Jesus does not rebuke Peter for carrying a sword, for having a weapon. There's no rebuke. And now another thing is that is a specific thing in the Gospels. That's a specific thing that's happening that is foundational to our faith. That event is the arrest of Jesus and the leading up to the crucifixion and the resurrection. In other words, this is not a normal day.
Right.
This is not a day to judge all others by, right? This is a specific event, the arrest of Jesus. This isn't some uh, this isn't some rapist or burglar or murderer that is just coming to get you, coming to take your money, coming to take your daughter's virginity or something like that. This is a God ordained event. As he says, I believe in Matthew, don't you think that I could call down more than 12 legions of angels?
Right.
Don't you think I could do that? Which, by the way, that's a military weapon thing. He's not saying it's wrong to do that. He's just saying that's not God's plan.
He has a
He's not
mission and
saying,
he's got to
yeah,
fulfill
he's
it.
not saying this is a principle for all time for everybody. He's not saying don't ever use 12 legions of armies or weaponized beings to defend yourself. He doesn't say that. He says, don't you think I could? I have the power to. He's not saying it's wrong to. He says, I have the power and I'm choosing not to because of the joy set before me for what I'm about to do for humankind.
And I think
And
on that, Mike might
Malchus's ear,
respond.
Malchus's ear being cut off needs to be read in that context.
Well, and
Go
I,
ahead.
I I could imagine a response. I won't suppose to say what Mike would respond, but I could imagine a response would be, well, but doesn't that scene kind of show that even though Jesus could, um, uh, it would be better that even if we could avoid it, it would, or if we couldn't avoid it, it would be better to not be violent about it. Wouldn't it be better? Even Jesus says,
Sure, but
so
but that's one thing to recognize that in the abstract with 2020 hindsight. We
sure,
always look back with 2020 hindsight,
that's right. Yeah,
right? But in the moment, how are you supposed to make those decisions and those judgments?
right.
And oftentimes we make the judgment in 2020 hindsight because we already know what happened.
Hmm.
So, for example, if it's somebody, it's not, in other words, it's not the arrest of Jesus. Peter has his daughter with him, and there's a man coming after his daughter. He's going to rape her. He has a sword for self defense. That apparently that's why he had the sword. It's right there in the Gospels. Jesus does not say anything about not having, there's no sermon ever in the Gospel where Jesus says, don't carry a weapon. I know you have that, Peter, because I'm with you. I see you. Hi. You know,
But don't you think that's
there's no
dangerous?
way that Peter could be able to hide that from Jesus. I mean, it's so
Right,
obvious he has it, right?
right.
It'd be like carrying a pistol. That's the equivalent. It's a handheld deadly weapon. That's common for self-defense at that time.
That's right.
Okay, so he has the weapon, and Jesus does not give him any timeless principle about using weapons for self-defense. He just says, put that away. He heals Malchus's ear. We know it's the name of the guy is Malchus from the Gospel of John. And that's the end of the scene. And what we're supposed. I mean, Jesus. The next scene goes. He gets tried and crucified.
Yeah.
Um, but imagine instead of Jesus, Peter is defending his daughter. Now, okay, let's go the peace building route, and we hyper analyze in the moment what's happening. How can I be the least violent? Well, that might be the very worst thing you can do for your daughter.
Right.
And that's not peace building between father and daughter. That's not what it is. It's evil. It's evil because you're allowing an evil thing to happen to your daughter and you're going to crush her. You probably damage her. You'll probably hurt her if she's not murdered for life.
She'll
You might
certainly
even
need
damage her
counseling.
faith. If you do that in the name of Christianity, you might even drive her from the gospel. But if you look back on that afterwards, it's already too late. So making a second decision and being prepared. Now, see, what drives me nuts about the way he's looking at it is the being prepared part and having a culture, what he might call a gun culture, which in the healthiest way prepares people in safe, healthy ways for this. It's what Alexis de Tocqueville called a voluntary association.
Hmm.
These voluntary associations are supposed to be free to develop rules and culture that's healthy, like for anything. And what the Democratic side is trying to do is crush that, crush gun shows, crush training, crush access, uh, drive prices up, make it prohibitively expensive for people to buy ammunition, and take away training opportunities like they're doing in California, where they're coming after lead ammunition and gun ranges. So where are you supposed to train um, to safely handle firearms? Um,
It's
crushing
insane.
that gun code. Yeah, and so that you can't be prepared to help your daughter or you're that's criminal now. That's all been criminalized, increment by increment, and oftentimes by felony conviction.
Yeah, conflating that. Mm.
That's a serious thing. That's a serious thing to be comfortable with in the name of Christianity. Is growing and bloating out the state
That's
in the
right.
name of
Yeah.
peace building. In the name of peace building, and I think he's far too comfortable
He's crossed the line
with
between the
that.
giving up freedoms in order to giving up freedom in order for the sake of safety.
Yeah. Well, every single tyrannical government in history has had the same pattern of thinking,
Hmm.
and that is we're going to criminalize this, we're going to criminalize that. Pretty soon, all sorts of ordinary non-criminal conduct is criminal.
Hmm.
Thinking for yourself is criminal. Thinking for, let alone self-defense. Oh, by the way, they all criminalize self-defense with weapons.
Questioning.
That's
Yeah.
I mean that's obvious. So he needs to realize and needs to come to grips with you are in that tradition. You are on that path, and it's oftentimes a path.
Yeah, you're that side of
It
history.
yes, that's what that's the ordinary path for governments. It's rare. It's unique to have what we have. That's why people want to preserve it. And yes, okay, he's in Kentucky or whatever, and people are not very good at articulating it. Okay. They go to Democrat run schools. What do you expect?
Right.
You're making it worse. Anyway.
Yeah. I that you another another thing in here. One of the that I wanted to point out in his peace building. It's on page 73. He says he quotes a verse, Romans 12:18 says, quote, if it is possible, comma, and then he focuses the whole rest of the his writing on on the next part that says, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating that it starts out if it is possible.
Yeah.
This implies that it is not always possible.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Um, it's interesting the feeling that you have with peace, building
Mm.
peace. There is a naivety to this. The Democrats hated what Reagan was doing with the Soviet Union.
Yes.
He was very firm with them, but he was nice. He look at the guy. He's freaking Reagan, right? He's cracking jokes. He's warm, but he was firm, and he said, "You're an evil empire.
That's right. He called it what it was.
Yeah, tear down this wall." And Democrats were appalled by that.
They want peace through
That's
weakness.
historically, yeah, that is historically accurate. They were on the wrong side of that. They were appalled.
Yeah.
I don't know where I went.
I don't know where you went either.
Shoot, no idea. Oh,
You're black now.
there's I am.
Oh,
You
there you
know,
are.
they were appalled, and he had a firm foreign policy. I mean, he thought the way you get peace is not by being a soft, vulnerable
Likable.
person in the face of armed and powerful, tyrannical, criminal. I mean, it's criminal in the true sense, not the new made up sense.
Right.
Evil presence of people, and the fact that there is evil means that you have to have strength. I think he's not getting that. I think he thinks that you're going to just uh, inevitably there's going to be problems with overprojection of strength, but there's going to
It,
be problems on the other side too.
it's
If you
like
if you're too weak.
it's a naive perspective of, hey, we've both got guns. One of us has to be the bigger person and put their gun down first. But that's pretty naive. That's not how it works when you're dealing with good and evil. And yeah,
Well, here's how it works here in California. If someone comes into our church in California and starts shooting people, or a synagogue, which actually happened a couple of years ago in San Diego, um, which, by the way, I love the Jewish response to that, which is let's arm up. I mean, we need to harden
right.
these targets. Um, it's always been the case that you could just walk into a grocery store. Everybody knows this. You're not an idiot. Look at the entrance. Everybody knows that is not a fortress. That is a grocery store. And after all of the school I mean, I remember looking at my school when I was a kid and thinking anybody could just come in here. And for some reason, people have to see it happen before they think in terms of security. I
Yeah.
don't get that. I don't understand why you have to learn the hard way. I don't get that. But I don't know why people are so shocked when someone does that. It could always have happened. It happens in banks. It happens all over the place. It happened at the Olympics, for God's sake. It happens in airports, and those are hard targets. Let's stop pretending that we're shocked. Don't be shocked. There are evil people out there.
Hmm.
Stop acting like you're shocked. There are violent, evil people out there. And the only question is, can you stop them? And are you going to criminalize the effort to stop them by people, which is not criminal conduct? And, I mean, if you make if you make it stopping them with self-defense criminal conduct, and then act shocked that it happens again, I mean, I don't feel sorry for you. But in California, if you're carrying a firearm, well, first of all, it was illegal to be in church last year for Easter. But assuming we get our First Amendment rights, how about our Second Amendment rights in church? There's no way you can legally stop that person. In California, you're a criminal if you carry a gun into a church without a concealed carry license, or if you have a concealed carry license and you carry that gun into the church for the purpose of protecting people there, but the church is a school during the week, which how many churches have a preschool during the week? Then it's a felony because that church is a school. And that's the way the law is written, is private schools and public schools, any campus, any level, it's a felony for a concealed carry license holder who's been vetted by the state, background check, and trained, meets all of Dr. Austin's requirements, is a felon. He does not speak to that stuff at all. But I have a feeling, since I know which side he's on, I know he's on the Democratic side. That's the side that has made that criminal and continues to want it to be criminal. So how's that peace building?
Because schools have
Effectively, what he's done is he's
stickers.
criminalized self-defense. Yeah, he's criminalized self-defense. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's on the side of closing down the church for Easter as well. In the name of public safety, he criminalizes innocent conduct.
Yeah.
And and then he'll use the next church shooting or the next synagogue shooting as, oh, see, we need more restrictions. We need more expansive uh, definitions that fit into the criminal law under felonies. In the name of peace building, let's empower the state of California to crush and
Right.
bring civil death to people who are trying to save lives and prevent murder, people from being murdered. So anyway, do you have to go? I know you have to go at some point.
Yeah.
I wanted to be sensitive to that.
Yeah. I'm okay for
Hey,
a few more minutes.
oh, okay. Um, I think you are correct. I do need to give him his due in chapter 3, which is, I think, his best chapter. We do need to give him some compliments. Um, Chapter 3 is what I would use maybe in a logic class to talk about bad arguments. And he's right. People on our side, we do not know how to articulate our side in the best way. Sometimes we step right into it. The way our rhetoric goes. So we need to get into that.
You know, you know what I find on that, just to make a quick point on that, because I was talking about that particular thing with some guys at my church, uh, and I think where that comes from is it is a laziness of thinking, but it comes out of, this is common sense. Really, do I have to? This is from some of these guys' perspective. Really, I have to argue this? If you don't get this, I don't want to talk to you. You know, like that's kind of the common sense perspective that kind of maybe fuels or undergirds some of that lack of interest in articulating a position that seems to them so commonsensical.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that's a good reason. I'm just saying I've noticed that.
Yeah. Well, on my view, you can punish negligence with a firearm because that's classic criminal law, negligence.
Yeah,
That results in death or injury.
yeah,
That's perfectly fine. It's perfect. I mean, do we effectively prosecute murder and punish it? I'm not sure we do. I really don't. I'm not sure.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
would agree with you.
we have murderers in prison that are earning their college degrees on taxpayer money.
Yeah, I remember back in high
Where's
school.
the deterrence level for
I,
that? You
I
know?
remember back in high school being appalled that they gave cable TV um, uh, to criminals, and that there was some bill that passed in California to let them have weights, you know, and all this stuff. I'm like,
Yeah,
why do we need to upgrade all this stuff? Really?
yeah.
Let's put them to
At that,
work. If you're in prison, why aren't you out there doing all the crap that nobody wants to do, like cleanup? You know, why aren't you on the freeways more cleaning up? Why aren't you doing our road work, repairing our roads? You, I mean, we've got a free labor source there
yeah.
available in each state, and California wants to pay them to sit on their butts for doing something wrong. Anyway.
Well, I'm talking about really bad stuff like murder, um, not just any old criminal activity, which for the Democrat could be anything. It could
Yeah.
be any more and some Republicans, but for any more, I mean, they would love to criminalize possession of just even a non-functioning firearm or the
Right.
improper, you know, transportation of such a thing. I mean, you know, where you get in the details of these things, they're more than happy. They're ecstatic that you would experience civil death and not be able to provide for your family for that, even if no one got hurt. Meanwhile, the worst crimes are not treated the way they were in biblical times. There is nothing in his book about that.
That's interesting. Yeah,
There's
that's a
nothing
good
at
point.
all about his book about that. In fact, I don't ever see anywhere in the Bible where prison is lauded as a punishment for murder. It's always the death penalty.
Yeah.
It's always the death penalty. Well, we America took basic criminal law much more seriously for most of its history than we do now, and we hardly had any gun crime. And in fact, I mean, as recently as the 1960s, you could buy a gun through the mail with no criminal background check at all. Um, there were no problems with, I mean, in fact, there were no problems with school shootings, school mass murders. The technology was there. There was semi-automatic weapons, the same as today.
Hmm.
That technology's way older than the 1960s by at least half a century, at
And
least.
and I would argue that right around that time in the 60s, a little bit before leading up to that, but right around that time is when we saw a serious breakdown in the families, in family
And there was
structure,
this,
and in
yeah,
cultural structure.
yeah,
That's when
started
it
to
happened.
happen,
So I think that is really the catalyst for so many things wrong
possibly.
in our culture,
Sure.
or a catalyst,
It,
to put it that way.
it,
Yeah.
well, it was also at the same time, we can at least mention the correlation. I don't know about causation, but
Right, right.
certainly the correlation is there. All causation is correlation. We could start that, inference to the best explanation. But that's also when the Supreme Court started inventing new
Mm-hmm.
rights at the state level for all sorts of criminal defendants that had never existed in American history before.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that the police had much more discretion on how they treated criminal defendants. And there was a crime wave. There was a huge crime wave at the same time. But but we now have more laws and more regulations about guns and gun ownership and gun manufacture and gun importation than we've had in a long time. And background checks that we fight about, which is really just criminalization of a man giving his son a rifle for Christmas, which is what my parents did.
That's what my
And
grandpa did.
sure, and or loaning people a gun to go hunting, which is what everybody did in my church.
Yeah,
That would be a criminal offense
that's
if
crazy.
Democrats had their way. A criminal offense. It's already a criminal offense in California to do that. It's already. You have to go through a background check and a 10-day waiting period to cool off. Yeah, cool. I got to cool off. Hunting season's next week. Oh, 10-day waiting period. Okay, that's after the hunting trip.
Right.
Now I'm faced with being a criminal or engaged in innocent conduct, classically understood as innocent conduct. You see, we're stretching the criminal law out of all recognition.
Yeah,
But
that's
we're
right.
against mass incarceration. We're against, I mean, give me a break. Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah, more laws need to be taken off the books than put on.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to need to have a cigar next time. I get too worked up on this.
That'll
I'm
help calm us.
serious.
That'll be in lieu of our 10-day waiting period. We can cool off with a cigar.
Yeah, yeah.
Why can't you just go apply for a gun and then have a cigar? I mean, that would work, right? That would chill you out.
Maybe we'll do this again tomorrow. We need to get further into this book.
Yeah, for sure.
What do we got left? What do we got left? We got um,
5 and 6 next, or do you want to get into what we've been going? You want to get in deeper with what we've got?
a Bible and a gun. Okay, let's definitely talk about that.
Okay.
Um, and
Christ,
Christ character
character, and a
and a
cult
cult.
45.
Oh, he mentioned a cult, so we definitely have to do that. And you know what? I will have a cult
Oh,
on my lap
nice.
when we talk about that.
I don't have a cult yet.
Which, by the way, the Colt 45 he's talking about is technology that was patented in 1911.
Yeah.
Jeez,
Long before we started having gun issues.
that was over 100 years ago. That was before World War One. More than thoughts
Yeah.
and prayers. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy! I'm gonna already have to have a couple of whiskeys in me before we get to more than thoughts and prayers. All
Oh
right.
my
Well,
goodness. All right, brother.
okay,
Well,
buddy.
it's good to talk about some of this stuff. I hope it's helping people. And if there's questions, definitely.
Oh, I forgot. I was going to ask you to do the benediction because I always love when you do that.
Okay.
I haven't been asking the recent. I've forgotten it the last couple times.
So you want me to pray? Close us in prayer.
Yeah.
Okay. Father God, thank you for giving us an opportunity for sharing our thoughts about this and continuing a dialogue for people that want to think critically about these things, think well about these things. Um, Help us to continue building in ourselves and for the sake of others, our minds and our souls in your name. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. So
All right,
maybe
dude.
tomorrow or the next day we can move
Yeah,
on.
either one.
Okay.
However
Okay,
you're ready.
cool.
All right. See you, brother.
See ya.
All right, bye.